Definitely with anxiety, it's just being able to connect with that part of you that was wounded as a child. And the anxiety gets worse because it's yelling at you for attention. If you had a child in front of you who is 3 years old holding his arms up, crying, would you just say, no, I got to go on the internet right now, or I got to go have a drink right now? No, you'd pick him up and you'd hold him and you tell him he was okay. And that's what I mean when you find that alarm in your body. And this is one of the things that I kind of teach people is, where is this alarm in your body? Find it and then really pay attention to it, because chances are that's the part of you that needs the healing. And you don't get that healing by thinking about it. You get that healing by feeling it. You got to feel it to heal it, basically.
Welcome to the Pave Your Paradise podcast. I'm Mandy Ross, international media personality, speaker, writer, life cheerleader, and coach. Each episode, I'll share a guest or an idea to help you blast through your limiting beliefs, nourish your soul, and connect with yourself to take your relationships, health, business, and life to a next level. We don't play small. We're meant for great things. We take our struggles and turn them into slam dunk successes. This is the place for you to create your best you so you can pave your personal path to paradise. Are you with me? Let's do this. Hello and welcome back to the show. If you're just tuning in for the first time, this is Pave Your Paradise podcast, and I am Mandy. And if you have been tuning in regularly, I just want to say a huge thank you for tuning in every single week. I feel so honored and blessed to be sharing this time with all of you guys out there listening. And I want to know how you're tuning in. Are you on a walk right now? Are you tuning in while you're driving somewhere? Are you working out? Like, what are you doing? Take a shot, send it to me on social media. Make sure you tag me, Mandy J. Russ, and Pave Your Paradise podcast hashtag as well. And I might just send you a little gift for doing so. I love seeing the behind the scenes of your life as well as sharing my own with you guys every week. And I am super excited to announce that I have a Patreon now. A Patreon account is basically a way for you guys to be even more connected to me and the podcast and to show your love and support. And I am ready to serve you even more through my Patreon account. I'm going to be having lots of additional resources that I'll be sharing on it. And if you want to join the official Pave Your Paradise community, where you'll be receiving tons of self-growth and self-love tips, techniques, and tools for your personal development toolbox, and connect further with me in live group calls and coaching, plus be supporting the podcast and me to raise awareness on mental health and self-love and other amazing missions out there, please visit my new page, which is up at www.patreon.com/MandyJRoss. I made it the same as my other social medias, so you guys would have everything the same to remember. So that is it, and I am so excited to also be connecting with you on my Patreon account. And now I am super stoked to feature a very special guest on today's episode, Dr. Russell Kennedy, otherwise known as the Anxiety MD. Now, so many of you have reached out about anxiety and mental health in particular, so I'm thrilled to bring you a leading expert on the topic today. Dr. Russell Kennedy, a.k.a. the Anxiety MD, is a part medical doctor, part brain science geek, part rebel, and part stand-up comic. No joke. His passion lies in helping people get more true feeling and less false thinking in their lives. A recovered, stressed out, burnt out medical doctor, Dr. Russ wants to show you that healing stress and anxiety has much more to do with the body than the mind. His experiences with LSD, Ayahuasca, Psilocybin, and MDMA have given him insights into his own anxiety and provided non-traditional ways of understanding and alleviating our worries and fears. He wants to share his insights with the world. Dr. Russ is finishing a book tentatively called The Anxiety RX to be published in late 2019. The book combines his passion for the mind-body-spirit connection with his strong foundation and degrees in academic medicine, neuroscience, and developmental psychology. The book is designed to show anxious, stressed out people how to see their stress so that they don't have to be their stress. For those committed to changing their feeling state, Russ offers personal and group sessions, and he can easily be found all over social media by searching The Anxiety MD. I'll put the link to his website where you can find everything about him in the show notes below as well. So Dr. Russ is a physician, he's a speaker, entertainer, and so much more. We met through a mutual connection. He sent me some info on what he was up to, and upon looking further into it, I knew I had to get him on the show for you guys. His alternative name, The Anxiety MD, is quite perfect for him, as he's a global leading expert on the topic of anxiety. Because of his diverse background from the medical, alternative healing, and spiritual worlds, and his own personal struggle and transformational journey with anxiety and mental health, he's full of insight and inspiration. He's someone who I completely appreciate and respect for what he's creating in this world, especially the positive impact he's having on ending the stigma around mental health and providing solutions to those who are battling it. I've implemented some of his strategies for my own anxiety and have seen a positive difference in my life, so I had to share them with y'all. I want to continue bringing on expert guests that will help you, inspire you, and empower you, and Dr. Russ is a breathing, living, walking example of paving your own path to paradise. In this episode, we deep dive into his personal journey with anxiety, trauma, and healing your pain points. We go right into the nitty-gritty of what's happening to your mind and body when you experience anxiety, techniques that you can start doing today to help you with anxiety and panic attacks, plus proactive measures you can take to help manage the stress and anxiety in your life. And also, as per usual, we chat about intimate relationships and in particular, conflict resolution and connecting deeper with your partner, and so many other delicious topics. So I hope y'all enjoy this interview as much as I did with Dr. Russ. Hello, Russell Kennedy. Thank you so much for joining me on Pave Your Paradise podcast.
Thanks, Mandy. It's really good to talk with you.
I'm really excited to have you here on the show because anxiety, which is your expertise, is something that so many people deal with. It's just such a pleasure to be able to chat about that and so much more, I'm sure, on today's episode. What was the first thing you did when you woke up this morning?
I mean, I usually do the same thing every day. I usually wake up in a little bit of alarm, and I've done that for like the last, 25 years. And I always just put my hand on my chest and just basically say, I've got you. And as we come out of the dream landscape into sort of the real world, I just really just connect with myself. And then I go have a pee.
Always interesting what people have to say. And I love that you started with that. Yeah, it's funny that initial waking up, I definitely want to discuss later on, because there's something about that time of going from your dream state into reality, or if I may say so myself, this could be the dream state we're in now. I'm not sure.
But in neuroscience, we actually call that the hypnagogic state. It's just as you're falling asleep and just as you're coming in a wakefulness. It's called the hypnagogic state, and it's a tremendously receptive part for the subcortex, for the part of the brain that we don't have direct access to most of the time.
That makes so much sense. I've had mornings where I literally have woken up in exactly what you're describing, and it can sometimes be days on end because, as you know, knowing each other for a little while now, having both suffered from anxiety and suffering from anxiety, there are definitely mornings when I wake up and it's almost like how you described, where it's almost that like, and you wake up and you're like, oh, okay, I need to soothe myself.
Often I see that with people when they were younger, when it wasn't safe to be safe. Like you have to keep your guard up all the time. And then when you're in sleep, you have to let your guard down. And then there's just that between that letting your guard down state and then sort of coming back into vigilance again. It can be a really sharp transition. It can really fire a lot of us into alarm. And we'll talk all about that and what you can do about it and how you can, heal from anxiety and stuff. I've been waiting for this to talk to you for a long time, Andy. This is a big treat for me.
Aside from work, what gets you up in the morning?
Well, I have my dog who turned 10 years old today, who's a Labradoodle. He's 85 pounds. and he is,
Aw,
oh,
happy
happy
birthday.
birthday, Buddha, boo boo. He's great. You know, he's been through a lot of tough times with me as far as that goes. I have two stepsons and a daughter and a granddaughter with another grandson on the way. So I've got a lot of family stuff to do. And what gets me charged is just helping people understand their minds and their bodies and how they're intimately linked and how one really affects the other and what they can immediately lower the stress in their life and start training themselves to, so they don't need a therapist. They become their own therapist. They resource themselves. You know, so I give people tools so that they learn how to resource themselves, and that's what charges me up.
That's such a beautiful reason to jump out of
Yeah.
bed in the morning. What has been the highlight of your week?
The highlight of my week, I guess, is really starting to get the hang of my book. I'm writing a book right now on anxiety, to with my own journey of anxiety and how to help other people, because I do feel that we use the wrong paradigm in trying to heal anxiety and most mental illnesses from psychiatry and from psychology. And I think we really have to go in through the body, and that's really starting to become apparent, whereas the theories now where we just talk to a patient and expecting the talk to go in there and start undoing those implicit memories doesn't really work. So I guess it's just, you know, getting this book out there and then just reading back to myself, like, this is really going to change. This is going to be a game changer. It's going to be a game changer for people. It's going to be a game changer for therapists. And, you know, and I wouldn't have found it unless I did some LSD and got a completely different view of what it was like to be anxious.
And that's the thing, Russ. I mean, I completely resonate with your journey of being a human experiment. I love the fact that you put yourself out there. You really throw yourself into different healing techniques. And I'd love if you could share a bit about yourself and your background and your personal journey and story surrounding anxiety, given that you are the anxiety MD yourself. It would
Right.
be great for everyone to hear where this all initiated.
Well, I was born a poor sharecropper's son, and no, I was born in Ontario. My father was mentally ill and had schizophrenia and bipolar. So one of them's bad enough, but two of them's really bad. And growing up as a sort of a 10, 11, 12-year-old, I really saw my father collapse into psychosis. And to see the person that's supposed to be looking after you start losing it. It was never violent or abusive, but just you could see that he just wasn't contacted with reality, and that was really scary for me. So I kind of, you know, kind of withdrew into my body a little bit, and then up into my mind, and stayed there ever since. Stayed in my mind for so long, and tried to solve things from a mind-based perspective, because I was really starting to develop anxiety, mostly about developing his illness, because there was a heritable component to schizophrenia and bipolar. So I started being really worried that I was going to get this. So my anxiety started to creep up over the course of my, you know, mid-teens, late teens. And I thought, okay, well, what can I do about this? Well, I can go to med school. I can do that and become a doctor, which is what I did, and had a lot of anxiety through med school, but still made it. And then finished med school and was still struggling quite a bit with anxiety. Became a yoga teacher at that point, and then became a touring stand-up comic for about 10 years with Yuck Yucks. That was kind of fun. So in the daytime, I was doing medicine at the clinic, and the nighttime, I would go out and do sets at Yuck Yucks and be a comedian. So that actually helped my anxiety. And over the course of time, I ran into so many people who also struggled with anxiety. And I tried so many different things. I went to India and lived at a temple there for a while. I tried Byron Katie's School for the Work. I tried LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, ayahuasca. Read every possible book on neuroscience that I could get a hold of, and just tried to educate myself in what my brain and my body was doing. And then when I did some LSD, because I was basically, my back was to the wall. I just come back from India. I thought that was going to cure me, and I came back worse than I ever was. And a friend of mine who's an Ayurvedic doctor said, well, you know, we're going to have to really give you a different change on your perception here. So he gave me some LSD, and then I had the revelation on LSD that my anxiety was not in my mind at all. It was actually lodged in my body. And so I started working on both the mind and the body. And as I worked more with my body and sort of became more in tune with that, and that's what I said about this morning when I first get up, the first thing I do is I put my hands on my chest and just really connect with that part of me that, was 13 and petrified of losing his dad, and just connecting with that. And I've realized that when we connect with our body, the mind takes care of itself. If you can calm your body, the mind will often take care of itself. Since then, what charges me up is to sort of give this alternate profile of how to treat anxiety, because I have it. I'm an anxiety physician and neuroscientist, and I also have the condition myself. So, I've seen what helped, and what helps superficially and what helps deeply. And my mission is to show people what you can do to really help. And I understand the frustration. I was so frustrated. I had such a dislike for psychiatry and psychology because they never seemed to help me. Because they're always, we'd go in, we'd have an hour session. They talk about, my childhood, my dad, how difficult it was, blah, 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 the whole thing. And I really wasn't getting anywhere. I mean, it felt good temporarily, but until I really started dealing with this issue in my body, which was shown to me on LSD, that's when I really started to get better. And that's kind of the combination of, so now I use a combination of, hardcore neuroscience and medicine and this sort of more ethereal, stuff that I learned on psilocybin and ayahuasca and LSD, just to, as a frame of my perception, because if I hadn't done those psychedelics, I would never have the perception, the complete reversal of perception that I needed, because trained as a medical doctor, we're very, very analytical. And that was being so analytical was actually making my anxiety worse. And a lot of anxious people are like that. They're very, very up in their heads, and they try and think their way out of it. And the more thinking you do, the worse anxiety gets. But anxiety will not tell you that. Anxiety will sit in the corner and go, hey, come on over here and think some more. This will help you. And it just makes you worse and worse and worse.
Oh my goodness, Russ. I absolutely love it. I love everything that you said as far as just your openness to just life, but also healing. And given that your background was so one-sided in one way, being that you came from such a strong medical background, I have so much respect for the fact that you were so just open and willing to try other things. And I think a lot of times that frustration that you're talking about, it's from that frustration when our back is so against the wall that we're finally open to trying other things that maybe we wouldn't have been open to before.
Oh, absolutely. Like I'm a pretty scaredy squirrel to start with, right? I'm very much, I'm very much an alpha male for sure. Like I go to the gym, I do that stuff. I hear, I was really brought up in that alpha male dogma, and I had to become an alpha male. I had to become an alpha child, because when my father got sick, I kind of, as the oldest male, got zapped up into the sort of parental role of the family, because my father couldn't do it. I was the oldest male, so I got shot up into that alpha role. So I'm used to being alpha, but that constant drive of being alpha all the time just wore me right down. And it became a persona too. Like, and that was the stand-up comic and the yoga teacher and the doctor. Like, all that was a mask. It was just a shield to protect, to try and show people that I had it all together. And my dad was nuts, but I'm not, and I've got all this stuff together. And really, the height of my anxiety was when I had all these things going at once. And it was just a mask. Like, it felt so good to sort of, leave that sort of doctor thing behind. And I still hold on to it. Like, I still have an ego. Like, I still love the fact that I'm a physician and a neuroscientist. I still love that because I was trained in that mode. But for a lot of my life, it was this compensatory mechanism for just feeling like I was an outcast, an outsider. I didn't really feel like I connected, and I had to teach myself how to be socially engaged, because I was really withdrawn as a teenager. I had very few friends. I thought I was going to become the world champion snooker player, so I spent all my time down at the pool hall. I had a bit of a checkered childhood. So but I realized it all comes together. But my main goal, like I said, my main goal is to really help people understand what's going on in their mind and what they may be doing in therapy or doing for themselves that they believe is helping them may actually be making them worse.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think I speak for a lot of audience members out there. A lot of people who are listening, I'm sure, have had a colorful past with their parents. If not, that's totally cool. But I know many people who are listening have as well. And there's something really interesting too, if we can dive into that parent-child relationship, because from a biological standpoint, there was the fear that was planted in you as a seed from a very young age that genetically speaking, you could become like your father. But from a psychological perspective, that's where that really innate sense of fear of overcompensating, of not turning into your father, that like I know for a fact I can certainly relate, having a parent who had mental health issues growing up as well as an addiction. It was like I used that as a catapult of not going in the direction. It was like it forced me to do everything I possibly could to steer me in the complete opposite direction of never having to turn out, quote unquote, like that. Is that where that seed of fear was planted in you? That is the catapult that basically turned into anxiety? Can you dive into that?
I think that's probably a fair assessment too, because I got on this treadmill of if I'm accomplishing and I'm moving forward and I'm holding down a job, I'm not my father, because he never really could hold down a job. He had a difficult time with relationships, and so I'm thinking, well, I'm going to do everything I can not to be him, even though I loved him, and he was, when he was sane, he was wonderful. He was probably the most intelligent man I've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Very kind, loving, very athletic. Like everything a guy, like a boy would want in a dad, minus the schizophrenia part.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, for me, overachieving was my way of proving I wasn't him. Right.
Mm.
But it was just such a treadmill. It's such a treadmill, and what you resist persists. Like what you try to sort of push away from, you gradually become. And as I tried to become more not him, I actually became more like him, because I was driving myself
It's like that
crazy with anxiety.
the neuroticism around it, and like the obsession around it literally was driving you crazy.
Yep. But I also know it's the people that have the traumas, in childhood and that kind of stuff. Like, we're kind of the people that change the world. Like the
Totally.
people with the steady attachment figures and the parents, and then, you know, it's the people that have the trauma. Like, but it's a double-edged sword too. If you have too much trauma, then you're dysfunctional, and then and it's not your fault. It's just that you just weren't able to kind of rise above the trauma. And there's I know so many people that have had so much more trauma than I did, growing up. But there is that kind of sweet spot between having a fair amount of trauma in your life and then overcoming it, and then saying, hey, you other people, this is what happened to me. If this is what's happening to you, this is what I did about it, and this is what really made a difference. And the fact that I could use my physician background and my physician knowing the brain and how the brain works, and how we grow up into attachment or lack thereof, like all these things kind of come together, and I'm able to kind of put them all together and just sort of say, here, this is probably what's happening with you.
If someone was to come to you as a leading expert on anxiety and say, Dr. Russ, I honestly have no idea where this stems from within me, what would you say to
Right.
them? Like, they
Well,
know that they are experiencing the symptoms of,
yep.
what anxiety is, but they don't know where it came from and like what's really going on inside of them. How would you help them?
One question I ask people that I can't quite pin down. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing and only one thing about your life, what would it be? And that 99 times out of 100 tell. So what would that be for you, man? If you had a magic wand right now, if I gave you a magic wand and you could change one thing about your past, what would it be?
Putting the interviewer on the spot.
Or you don't actually, you don't. We can actually move forward. I can tell you what it would be for me. You don't have to say what it is for you. But what it would be for me was my dad's illness. I, I
Yeah.
would I would rather have, I would go back and, I would give everything up, the whole MD, the whole shebang, if I could have had a healthy dad. So that tells me that is probably the source of my anxiety. And I can pretty much guarantee you that that's where it is. But when people don't know, all anxiety is separation anxiety. And almost always it occurs in childhood, unless it's PTSD, which is a different kind of kettle of fish
Totally.
altogether. But that's usually the question that I'll ask people. But I'll often do like a reading on people. Since
Mm,
I left medicine 5 years ago, my intuition has gone up like through the roof. So often I can see into people, and I could do this when I was a doctor too. I could come in, if a patient came in to see me, I could tell if they had a physical illness or a mental illness. There was just like a gift that I had. But the problem with that is that I would read everyone as they came in the door, and sometimes I'd see 30, 40, 50 people in a day at one of the walk-in clinics, and it just drained me. Like, it was just exhausting, and that's one of the reasons I burned out. So
totally.
just coming back, it's finding out, where the crux of that is, and then finding that in your body. And then we also need to find out the story that you tell about it too, because the story that you tell about your parent is how you're going to remember your parent. And if you tell the story about well, my mother was cold and distant, and that's the story that you tell yourself and to other people, those are the only memories you're going to curate. Those are the only memories you're going to recall, because that's the ones consistent with your narrative. Now, so you need both. We need to connect with the body as well. I'm not just saying this kind of spiritual, it's all the body, that's will fix everything. No, you need the mind as well. But what we're doing in this society is we're going through 90% is talk therapy, and maybe there's a leading edge people 10%. Not so much the medical doctors, but the psychologists are kind of catching on to, hey, where does this kind of lock into people's bodies, and can we use that as a way of connecting with people? Can we use their body to kind of heal their mind in a way? And that's going to be where
Mm.
psychotherapy goes in the next 10 years. That and psychedelics. Those are the two things that are going to change psychotherapy in the next 10 years. Is psychedelics and getting people into their body, a more somatic focus or a body focus in psychotherapy.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me given, and no no bias, of course, that you and I have a background in mind, body, soul work. But really, it's
Yep.
that integration of all three, I think, that is more and more becoming mainstream because people are realizing that you can't address one and ignore the others. That's not a full treatment for healing. It's interesting too, not that, again, I always say this because I've done a podcast on psychedelics and plant medicine. It was very interesting because we're talking about the child and parent trauma in general from an early life. Mine happens to be as well to do with what you're talking about as far as having a parent with a mental illness and an addiction in my case. And it was interesting because when I have experimented with plant medicine, it usually ends up going back to my childhood, and it has something to do with that parent. So
Of course.
it's so interesting how it's all so correlated, and it isn't until you're willing to seek out different healing methodologies that everything always stems back to that trauma, like everything.
Yeah. And everything becomes a coping mechanism. And one of the definitions of a neurosis is a coping mechanism that works, that you keep riding till the wheels fall off. Like, anxiety is a coping mechanism for a lot of people. Being hypervigilant, being constantly warning, what ifs, what worst case scenarios, creating those in your mind in a way is a coping strategy. And then if I'm going to take that coping strategy away from you by helping you alleviate anxiety in your life, it's going to be seen by your unconscious mind as a threat, because on some level people believe, and I'm the same way, that my vigilance, my constant worrying is protecting me. When I feel like the worry is protecting me, it's going to be really hard to get rid of something that you believe is protecting you. So what I do with my clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, is I give them another place to go, which is typically in the body, which is typically a place of safety, which is connected. I would, with you, I would get you to go back to a point in your childhood with your dad that was really painful for you, and then have you talk to little Mandy and say, I know this is really painful. I'm making this up. I know this is really painful to see dad kind of go off the rails and get into rages and all that kind of stuff. How are you feeling about that? And then have little Mandy talk back to you. And I know this sounds woo, and for a medical doctor, sometimes I want to have a seizure when I start talking about this stuff. But it does actually go in there, because unless you affect the underlying implicit memory programs that are feeding this neurosis, you're not going to fix it. If you're in a floodplain, making more sandbags will help, but the best thing to do is build a better dam. So it's building a better dam, going at the source of the problem, and sort of alleviating it from there, from a body-based perspective. And that's what I found on LSD. Yeah.
So, what is actually going on when people have anxiety? Like, what is really happening from a physical, but also a mental and an emotional standpoint? Like, what's really happening in our bodies? Because anxiety, as well, I just think the term itself is thrown out there so often, and people just kind of use it as for people who either are experiencing it, they know firsthand the feeling of it, but what's
Right.
really going on in your body when you have actual anxiety?
This is my kind of theory of what happens with anxiety. Let's say, for sake of argument, when you're a child, you have a cup in your brain, and that cup can hold a cup's worth of trauma. Now, say you pour in 2 cups of trauma to that child's brain. The first cup will get held by the cup, and then the second cup will spill over because it's too much for their little brain to handle. So what happens with that excess negative traumatic energy? It gets stored in the body, and it resonates from that place in the body from that point on. So for me, it's spilled out into sort of my solar plexus area. So that creates a sympathetic, the autonomic nervous system, the 2 wings, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, a sympathetic fight or flight type response in that area where that trauma is now stored in my body. So the alarm goes off in my body, and my brain, just being a compulsive, meaning making, make sense machine, says, hey, something's going on in our body that is suggesting that we're under threat. And then it
Mm.
looks around and it looks around and says, where's the threat? Well, I'm sitting here in my office right now looking around at my shirts and my other computer and stuff. There's no real threat. So what your mind does is it makes one up because it
Ah,
has to be consistent with how your body feels. And then when your mind makes up a threat, like, oh my God, maybe my dog's gonna have, maybe, Buddha's 10 now, he may not last a lot longer because he's a bigger dog. So that creates a certain amount of, anxious thoughts in my mind, which of course, because the body can't tell the difference between a thought and something that's actually happening, that alarm gets reignited. And as the alarm gets reignited, the mind makes a corresponding worse thought that goes along with the alarm in the body. So the alarm in the body activates these thoughts of the mind, and the thoughts of the mind activate the alarm in the body. So it starts this cycle. And it's kind of like we're biting our own tails. Like
mm.
it hurts. So we bite our own tails by making the alarm worse, which makes the anxious thoughts worse, which makes the alarm worse. So that's how people get locked into chronic anxiety.
Does that explain then why, for example, you said yours is locked in your solar plexus, or for people
Yeah.
who aren't familiar with that term, it's basically right above the belly button area. So that's kind of like where your gut, quote unquote, when you have a gut reaction. So for someone
Yep.
like you, when that snowball effect of stress in the mind starts happening, do you physically start feeling sick to your stomach, or do you feel kind of like gut wrenching? But for somebody else, maybe it got locked and there's this trauma that's trapped in, say, their heart area, and hence maybe their heart starts literally hurting. Is that possible?
Absolutely. And throat stuff
Yes.
too. When you if it gets, I've seen people with anxiety in their throat, and almost always it's because they can't say something to a parent. That's when I see people with anxiety
Oh,
that's in the throat, like it's kind of like, fifth chakra. And again, this whole medical thing, like whenever I talking about chakras, it's like, oh, start to sort of shiver a little bit. But fifth chakra, like it's in your throat. If you get pain in your throat or pressure in your throat, it's probably because you're not saying something that you need to say,
you're
and
not
then that
speaking
causes,
up.
and that traps the energy. So usually when I get people, I call it find your alarm. So find your alarm when you're really anxious and upset, without sort of focusing so much on your brain and your mind. So where am I feeling this in my body? And almost always it's somewhere between your chin and your pubic bone. Usually it's almost always in the midline. I have had people say they had it in their knee or they had it in their face, but typically it's almost always center of the body. and
Mm.
and they can localize it. Like when I was on LSD, or I was coming off LSD, I saw this sort of purple crystalline oval shape, sharp oval shape sort of mass that felt like a pressure and an ache at the same time, just to the right of my solar plexus. So just where my ribs meet, just below where my ribs meet in the front there at the lower end of my sternum. And I still get it to this day. Like when I wake up in the morning and I feel that alarm, that's where I feel it. And it never changes, and it's always in the same place. And that's why I put my hand on it and I go, hey, because I think that alarm is essentially 13-year-old me watching my dad being hauled away in an ambulance to the mental hospital, the psychiatric intensive care, which is a horrible
Mm-hmm.
place, by the way. And
Mm-hmm.
and it just revives. Now I have the choice at that point, because I know my mind is going to start, when the alarm starts coming up in my body, I know my mind is going to come along with all these horrible thoughts. I know it's going to be, oh, the book's going to flop, you're never going to get things going. Like all this kind of stuff comes up. And it's like, I know mind, I know what you're going to do. And when I wait for it and I see it that way, it's so much easier to just kind of go, yeah, okay. But if I look at those thoughts without awareness and consider them true, then of course the whole alarm anxiety cycle is going to start again. So the whole trick for me is being able to separate that sense of alarm that's in the body and the thoughts. They want to be linked, but
Mm-hmm.
consciously, when you come into conscious awareness and you can see, okay, I feel this alarm in my system right now. And some people will feel it in their throat, pubic bone, belly button, wherever you feel it. Just realize that what that's going to try and do is it's going to try and fire up the thoughts of your mind, because your mind wants to make sense of what's going on in your body. And if your body is feeling uncomfortable, your mind is going to give you thoughts that are completely consistent with that discomfort in the body. So it's not going to come up with stories about kittens, cookies, and picnics. It's going to
Yeah.
come up with stories about things that you're worried about. And typically it takes, what it does is it takes your past and then it tosses it into your future and it makes it look real. And that's the whole thing about anxious thoughts. They're always about the future. It could be 5 minutes from now, it could be 5 years from now, but they're always about the future. So if you pull yourself into the moment and you say, am I safe in this moment? Like, am I safe? I know I'm feeling alarm in my body, but am I actually safe in this? And this is what I do when you ask me first thing when I sit there, I put my hand over that alarm and I go, are you safe at this moment? Like, are you literally lying in a warm bed, safe? And it's like, well, yeah. It's like, okay, that's all you really need right now. Am I safe in this moment? And when I do that with my patients, sometimes it's the first time they've allowed themselves to feel safe, even if it's just for 5 seconds.
Oh, that is so beautiful to hear, Russ. And I say that as well from personal experience, because when we're able to bring ourselves back into present moment, and this is, again, coming from someone, aka myself, who has a lot of anxious thoughts over all different scenarios. And when I feel that creeping up, I also go to that present moment awareness. And there's so much freedom, is the word I love to use. But I love that you said safety. And I think they are one and the same in this scenario. The freedom lies in feeling safe, as you said, sometimes for the first time, and being able to just be aware that you're here, you're fully okay, and you don't have to go into that snowball effect. It's that
Of
awareness.
of the thoughts, absolutely. Because here's the best thing you can do when you start overthinking is go into sensation. And that's why I put my hand on my chest. Sometimes I'll rub my hands together. I don't know if you know that little yoga thing where you rub your hands together really fast and then you put the palms over your eyes. It
Yeah.
just heats up. It's like I do the same thing with that area of my chest. And there's or just putting my fingertips together. If I'm at the grocery store, you don't want to be sort of rubbing your hands together and putting them over your eyes. You look like a bit of a weirdo. But
I
but
would probably be that one person
yeah,
who actually would.
Mandy, you
I'll be
probably
I'll
would.
be the I'm the
I've seen your
weirdo in
Instagram
aisle 4.
photos. I've seen your Instagram photos, and I bet you would do that. You would probably
And I
do
bet
it.
I get some people actually on board to try it themselves in the
Yeah,
grocery aisle
I'm
too.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would. But getting into
Oh,
sensation, here's the great thing about getting into sensation, right? So your brain, let's just say your brain is 100% of these negative thoughts. Like it's just
mhm.
they're just crawling like cockroaches all over your mind. Now, let's go completely into sensation, or as completely into sensation as you can. Say, putting your hands together, or putting your hands on your chest, or rubbing your thighs, or clapping, or singing, or breathing, or focusing on your breathing. So now your brain is maybe 50% devoted into sensation, but still 50% in the thoughts. But what you've done is you've dropped 100% of those negative thoughts down to 50. And once you drop those thoughts down to 50, then you're kind of like, then you can see them as thoughts. When the thoughts are
Yeah.
100%, you don't even see them as thoughts. You just see them as you, and it takes you over. So getting into
Mm.
sensation is probably the best thing. One of my favorite little sayings that I made up is you can't beat thoughts on their own turf. You cannot go in there. You cannot argue with anxiety because it will always beat you down. So
Wow,
it's one
I
of those
love
things.
that.
You have to go out of your body first, out of your mind first, because people say like, I need to get out of my head. I need to get out of my head. Well, how do you do that? Well, people think, well, I'll think about something else. It's like, no, you're still in your head. When you're thinking about something else, you're still in your head. You got to get into your body. You got to get into the sensation of your body first, or your breath. Your breath is brilliant for this too, but just
Yeah.
get out of your head. And then, it's like having an argument with your partner. It's like you don't want to sit there and keep screaming at them because chances are things aren't going to go well. But if you both decide, hey, let's go for separate walks, come back in an hour, chances are you're like, you know what, I'm sorry. Yeah, I am too. But if you keep at it, if you keep at your thoughts, if you keep, hammering away thinking your thoughts are going to help you, they're just going to make you worse. And here's the worst part. Is your thoughts are going to try and tell you. They sit in the corner. It's like, no, more thinking is good. More thinking is good. Let's just do more thinking. I can think my way out of this. And you can't think your way out of a feeling problem.
Oh, you cannot think your way out of a feeling problem, Russ. That is brilliant. Brilliant.
I
Because
like
it's
to think
so
so.
true. And it's so funny because over the course of my life, and I know for so many people that I've either coached myself or who also are on a very profound healing journey, or other people who are practitioners, getting out of your body, things like physical activity. When I really think and boil it down to the bare basics of that, I find it almost impossible to be fully vested in a workout and be having copious amounts of anxiety. Do
Right.
anxious thoughts come up? 100%. I have anxiety or anxious thoughts that come up all the time. During workouts, sometimes that actually does happen for me. But overall, I find that when I move my body, such as when I'm dancing, when I'm doing a HIIT workout, when I'm even practicing yoga and doing flow and vinyasa, I find it very difficult to stay stuck in that anxious feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, your mind and body are together at that point. So one of the things that I love to recommend to people is matching breath and movement at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
yoga, I see a lot of yoga, like power yoga and that kind of thing too. And yeah, it's a great workout and that kind of thing. But if you really want to match your mind and your body, match your movement with your breath. Because if you match,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's why Tai Chi is so good. That's why Qigong is so good,
Oh,
because it
love it.
matches your movement with your breath. And then that brings your mind and body into alignment. And then you start dropping the alarm, you start dropping the thoughts, and then you can actually see things so much clearer. So even sitting in, lying in your bed, if you're petrified in your bed, just doing movement with your fingers and your breath at the same time. There's a little thing called box breathing, where you
Mm-hmm.
draw a box. Have you heard of box
Yeah.
breathing before?
Yeah.
Yeah, where you just draw a box as you raise your finger straight up as you inhale and exhale as you draw your finger across, and then down to make the other side of the box, and then across to meet the original point of the box. And it really, that's one of those things that combines your somatosensory cortex in your brain with your breath. Your body and your mind have to link up because you're
Mm-hmm.
consciously doing that. But when you're in anxiety breathes you. Like, it's breathing for you to try and keep itself going. So you'll get these, sort of shallow kind of breathing. And as you breathe that way, anxiety, it sends a message up to your brain through the vagus nerve, like, hey, there's something going on that's really stressful. What is it? And of course, your mind goes crazy again. So it's a matter of matching your body to your mind. And the best way I know to do that is matching your breath with your movement.
So if someone was out and
Yep.
they start feeling anxiety come on to them, what
Mm-hmm.
would be a go-to that they could literally do right now to calm themselves down?
Yeah. Well, what I usually do is it's a yoga mudra called Surya Rava Mudra, which is tip of your thumb, tip of your fourth finger. You can use I use both hands. Some people just use one. It's supposed to join the mind and the body together. And then if you imagine just breathing through like it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a crazy mind idea, but it's like breathing through your hands. Like if you were going to breathe and you
Give
were
me the
breathing through your hands.
visualization, because I think
So
there's a lot of visual people out there. So what would the
yeah, the
visualization aspect of that
visualization
be?
would be that you would have air around your hands, and then you would be breathing in, the air would come in through your hands, through your arms, and into your lungs, and then out through your arms, through your hands. And then you would just do that, and you could do that anywhere. Like, you don't have to raise suspicion about what you're doing, but fourth finger and thumb together. And even if you want to rub those fingertips together, because again, getting that somatosensory cortex of the brain, involved, is something that takes energy away from thought. It takes away energy from the neocortex, which is the part that's creating all these, horrible worries for you. So the more you can get into sensation, even rubbing your fingertips together, finding some breath technique that works for you, those are the best things to do. And there's no one size fits all. So it's just
Hmm.
finding a real breath technique that works for you. And like I said, the autonomic nervous system is really important. The sympathetic and parasympathetic, fight or flight, accelerator, parasympathetic, brake. So, and it's a lead horse system. So whatever the lead horse is doing, the rest of the system will follow. So if the lead horse is breathing, and you start controlling your breathing, and you start feeling into your fingertips, and you start matching your breathing with your movement, then you start connecting your body and your mind together. And anxiety and panic attacks are fundamentally when your mind and your body get disconnected. And it's a way the body starts to panic, and it's telling you, hey, we need our mind and our body back together. But it doesn't tell you in a way that you can understand it. It's the way that I'm telling you how to do it, is get your mind and your body back together. And that's the best way to alleviate a panic attack, is bringing your mind and body back together.
I
Okay,
want to
here it
help
is.
people out there
Okay.
with panic attacks.
Okay. So, and I've had them. So I know what they're like. And I still get them every once in a while. So here it is. Panic attacks get worse because we think, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can't have a panic attack here. This is a store. What if I pass out? It's on a bus. I can't deal. And the more you push that energy back, the more it's like you're pushing the energy like water behind a dam. So if you push it and push it and push it and push it, eventually it's just going to overflow the dam, and then it's going to explode. So what happens with me is I start feeling this tenseness in my gut. Sometimes I get this sort of funny taste in the back of my throat, and I know that I'm about to have a panic attack. What I do is I take control of this by saying, okay, fucker, let's go. Bring it on. I don't say it out loud, at the pool or anything like that. But I say, okay, let's go. Like, make this, if you're going to give me a panic attack, give me the best damn panic attack you've ever had. Like, I want to experience this in all its glory. Like, let's go. So it does two things. One is you're in control now of the energy. Like, the panic attack is no longer in control, and you're not resisting it anymore. So you're not allowing it to build and build and build and build and build. That's what gets people, is the build and build and build and build. I can't do this. I can't. And then boom, you have no choice but to experience the full aspect of the panic attack. And then we go into victim mode in panic attacks, which makes it way, way, way worse. So if you get out of victim mode, if you say, bring it on, open
And
up your chest, pull
surrender.
back your shoulders, surrender, but at the same time say, okay, let's go, bring it on, let's go. Because then
Yes.
you're taking control of it. Panic attacks thrive on the fact that you're a victim. They thrive
Mm.
on the fact that they have control. But if you take control away from that panic attack, so now I just enjoy the rush, and I can tell. And it's a great way of seeing how my mind compulsively wants to make a negative story out of that. Because typically what happens with panic attacks with my patients is the first two panic attacks or so that they have, they just feel like, they'll come in and see me and I had this weird feeling, I was, getting my pictures taken, and I had this just weird feeling in my chest, and just, I flushed, my body got flushed, and, my hands were tingling, and it just felt really uncomfortable. And then they'll have another one, and then they'll have one more, but the third one, they'll go, oh, I wonder if this is a heart attack. I wonder if this is like something that's going to really hurt me or kill me. Now, as soon as they
Hmm.
have that thought, then the loop gets completed. So the alarm in the body is flowing, and initially the brain doesn't know what the hell to do with it. But as soon as you give it a label that makes sense, like, I could be having a heart attack, I could be having a stroke, then the loop is completed. Now you're in a runaway train. Now the panic attack just explodes on you, because not only is your body alarmed, now your mind is alarmed too. And you don't have the rational ability in your neocortex, or your brain, to be able to stop it. So I'm saying when it starts, because once it blows up, it's really hard to be rational, because
Mm-hmm.
panic attacks were designed, I mean, this is a theory. Panic attacks were designed that all of a sudden, you come around a corner and there's a leopard there that's going to, try and eat you. I mean, panic attack, this is, I think, the origin of panic attacks way back in our physiology, was we need everything we have right now or we're going to die. So then you just run, right? So it gives you this rush of energy. And then if you don't know what to do with it, of course, then you start making up stories about it. And it's the stories that actually kill you. Now, so I have a story in panic attack that I'm really going to enjoy this. And I do. And I really do. And now I do get, I do see the thoughts knocking on my brain, like, this is horrible. This is horrible. When this is going to end? You're always getting these, but now I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever, bring it on. Let's go. Let's do it. And I'm going to enjoy the rush, and that has really put me in a position with the panic attack. I actually enjoy panic attacks now. It sounds psycho, but I do. When I get them, it's like, oh, okay, here's my opportunity to really let this thing go. And it works, and it discharges a lot of energy.
I can feel that energy of you making peace with the fact that they're just going to be a part of your life, but you have figured out a solution for yourself. And I would imagine that it's taken you many years to get to that state. For people out there who are listening, who are like, I get panic attacks, I can't even imagine my life turning into what you're describing now as having a solution, quote unquote, for when they start coming on. What are things that people can just start with to build up to being able to be in that kind of state to actually deal with and handle when their panic attacks start? Can you give me some tangible things that maybe they could practice or do in order to develop that kind of resilience?
Yeah,
it is resilience, but you're still embracing the fact that you're going to have them.
Right.
So it's not like you're not completely oblivious to the fact that they're going to happen, but that resilience towards making peace with them in the way that you have. What are some of the tangible things that people out there can start doing today in order to develop that kind of level of comfort with them?
Okay. Well, there's the short answer and the long answer. The short answer is start developing a breath practice of some kind, like Qigong, Tai Chi, whatever, something that matches your brain and your body together. Now, panic attack, the long answer is deal with your childhood trauma. That's the long answer, because it's the disconnection from your mind and your body, that energy that just it's there, that senses this ultimate disconnect between your mind and your body. That's what's exploding on you. And the patients that I know that get panic attacks almost always have some kind of huge decision in their life that reminds them of, something that they had to face when they were younger. So, I've got one woman who's, should I divorce my husband? They don't seem to get along. They've been in therapy. It doesn't seem to work. And then every once in a while they'll go on a holiday and it seems like it's okay. So for, 4 weeks out of a year, they get along fairly well, and the other 48 not so well. So she's in this, like, should I stay? Should I go? I can't quite. But it comes back to, her father, because her father would come and go, and she was afraid of being abandoned. So once we started looking at that underlying problem of her sense of abandonment, then a lot of that should I stay, should I go left. And she started projecting a different energy towards him. Now, the relationship isn't perfect by any means at all, but they're certainly, getting along, enjoying each other, having sex. That they stopped having sex for 3 years. So it's one of those things where your childhood wounding is basically what's charging up your panic attacks. And the thing, we have a little saying in therapy, it's not about what it's about. So when someone comes in and says, my wife is driving me crazy, yeah. So it's going to be, my wife is driving me crazy, or my husband is driving me crazy. It's not your wife or your husband. It's not what's happening now. It's basically 99 times out of 100, I can track back the same scenario to what happened when they were a child.
Something that their partner or someone in their life is doing is triggering something within them that happened in their life in childhood.
Virtually always. Virtually always. It's
Yeah.
not about your husband. It's not about someone that you met as an adult that's driving you nuts. It's an issue that you had when you were a child that's driving you nuts.
Wow, that's like some straight up truth
Well,
juice.
it's
People,
Freud, right?
you need to take, oh, I
Yeah.
love Freud. You need to
Yeah.
take this shot of truth juice. I love you, Pave Your Paradise podcast audience, but this is the truth juice that Dr. Russ is dishing to you and serving to you straight up today that I really think you need to take a shot of.
I'm different. I'm not for everybody. But
No.
I had a patient. I had a patient, and I'll call her Janet. And Janet was beautiful. Like she had just and a nice personality and just very caring and giving. But her father was an alcoholic who did abuse her. And she would attract men because she was so attractive. But she would only pick the ones that were alcoholics, right? She had all these guys
Mm,
that were really solid guys that would. And so she came in and she said to me, "Oh, I met this guy. He's great. He's a lawyer. He does this. He does this. He does this." And I said, "Is he an alcoholic?" And she goes, "Yeah, but he's been sober for a week." It's like, yeah, okay. So we take, as human beings, we equate familiarity in childhood with
mm.
security, right? So Janet, her father being an alcoholic was familiar to her. So she equated that with security. So as she got older, she started looking for people that would fulfill that perceived security that she didn't really have as a child. So Freud called that the repetition compulsion.
The fact that you subconsciously attract a mate that reminds you of that parental figure that was in your life growing up.
Yeah. And then you go into therapy going, my husband's driving me crazy, right?
What do you wish you'd known when you first started out? You can allow that question to morph into whatever you want it to. What's the first thing that comes from your gut?
What I would wish I would have known as a physician starting was that most illnesses had an emotional root, and I was treating the physical part of an emotional illness, and therefore my frustration was that I was chasing my tail, treating the wrong thing. That
Mm,
as a physician, that would be it. And just knowing that a lot of healing was my relationship with my patients, because I was very kind and open, as you can tell. Like I'm a pretty open person with my patients. So, and that's where the healing comes from the connection. Now we're trained as physicians to be these scientific objective observers, and that is not something that's going to help heal people. If most of illnesses are emotional and these people need emotional connection, and you're being this dispassionate, conscientious observer writing out prescriptions, that's really not going to heal people. So it is one of those things that I had a crisis of conscience, and I eventually had to leave medicine because I was just and I'm not anti-pharmaceutical. I mean, I think there's some brilliant pharmaceuticals out there, but they're overprescribed. One of my favorite sayings is, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you're
mm-hmm.
trained, and we are trained in medicine to use, pharmaceuticals, that's kind of our go-to. So we will look for the conditions and preferentially see, and I put C in quotation marks, those conditions so that we can prescribe the medication. And we don't get any kickbacks from the pharmaceutical companies. In the States, they were giving doctors computers and trips and all that kind of stuff. In Canada, we might get a dinner or maybe a round of golf. And even then, that was in the 90s. Like everything from 2000 on, I didn't take any money at all from pharmaceutical companies, but they couldn't in Canada. It was so tightly restricted in Canada that they couldn't. Now, I know I went off there, but my whole thing was, there are some good pharmaceuticals out there. There's not, it's not this all, you have to do everything holistic, or you have to do
Mm,
everything with a medication. There's a great way of sort of, allowing things to kind of just holistically flow together. I have people that are
definitely.
on medication, and I have people that I think, hey, you know what? I don't think medication is probably the right thing for you, because one of the things that I used to have a problem with antidepressants was not so much when they didn't work, but when they did. Because when they did work, a lot of the times people did not ever want to go back into the root cause of their problems. You don't want to
Mm,
go back into the fact that your brother used to physically assault you when you were 13 till you're 14 or 15. You don't want to go back, and you'd rather take a medication that sort of kind of numbs you to it
numbs it.
rather than
Yeah.
deal it. Now, there are people that have severe emotional traumas, and they need the medication, they and take it. I'm not shaming anybody,
Definitely.
but I'm just saying
Definitely.
that it's so overprescribed. And the other thing I like saying is, don't go to the hardware store looking for peanut butter, because don't go to your medical doctor thinking you're going to get psychotherapy, because we're not
Yes.
trained in that. I
Yeah.
am, but most doctors are not trained in psychotherapy. And it's sad, because most people go to their family doctors for help, and usually they'll get a prescription. And,
Yes.
because we only have 7 to 10 minutes with a patient, and that's really, and doctors want to help. It's not like so that's basically their go-to.
I think we're in a day and age where there is so much information available out there. And by all means, I'm not saying Google your own stuff, but I think it's really, as a patient, it's so important to also be aware of just self-awareness in general. Just as a
Yeah.
society, we need to cultivate more self-awareness so that we are not relying on the one person to be the be all and end all. And part of that happens from within. And that's only healing that you can have someone else tell you what to do, but that healing journey is going to happen from within inevitably. So I think that's important to also be proactive in your own healing approach, as opposed to relying on external people in your world to give you those diagnoses that more than likely you probably already know you have.
Yeah. And it's the other thing too is, like, the old model is, come to me, I'm the physician, you're basically, you're uninformed or whatever. I will, I'm the paternal figure here. I will fix you. Now that, disempowers patients. It essentially makes them victims in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, find the right medical care for you. I really do think that there's a great combination of allopathic medicine and naturopathic medicine and chiropractic, and everything has something to offer, and each field tends to sort of fire arrows at the other. And you had Nima, my buddy Nima, on the show like a few podcasts ago, that kind of stuff. And Nima and I talk every day, and we have little you know spats back and forth about chiropractic and medicine, and it's fun. We go back, in fact, because he's back and forth, because he's a chiropractor, I'm an MD, and then we do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work together. But it's amazing how well that we have sort of learned how to flow together with the two kind of very different mindsets towards healing.
Going into your daily habits, I'm very curious. What are some of the daily habits that you swear by for your success? And what does your morning routine specifically look like?
So, breath and body, for one, like focusing on my breath, savoring my breath. Is a little thing that I do every day called savor your breath. So no matter how anxious I am, no matter how off I am that particular day, I always just savor my breath and just really take it in and really love how it feels. I had asthma when I was a kid, so I know what it feels like not to be able to breathe. So I can really relish that feeling of breath. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that I do, breath and movement together. Meditation, I'm kind of hit and miss on, like I can pretty much tell you how my life is going by if I'm meditating. If I'm meditating, my life isn't probably going all that well. I'm just
Oh,
being
I hear
honest
you
here.
on that.
I'm
No,
just
Dr.
being
Russ,
honest here.
I
So
so feel you on that
yeah,
one. And I am a meditation teacher.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
totally get you in that
yeah,
kind of straying and then
yeah.
coming back.
Same with my journal. Same with my journal. If shit's going well, I won't write in that thing for like 6 weeks. But as soon as it starts to go bad again, it's like I start making journal entries and that kind of stuff too. So yeah, but I do like that, and I play guitar. I have a 15-year-old stepson who's a guitar maniac. We have 8 guitars in the house, so he's really gotten into it, and I've gotten into it a lot more. And I find music. I find the vibration. We're all energy. We're all vibration. So I find the vibration, and creating my own vibration is really, really important for me to kind of just, I'll go in and turn up the amp to, turn it up to 11, like, and I just go in there and just crank it away. And there's just something about playing your own music, and it just allows the emotion to come through you. And I have
Mm.
probably a 2-week process where I go into tears. The thing that puts me into tears, I watch YouTube videos of sad dog rescues. And I can't watch dogs that are that it doesn't wind up well for them. But what I'll do about every 2 weeks is I'll go in and I'll watch a dog who is being rescued. And that brings me to tears, because tears are the brain's natural way of healing trauma.
That's fascinating. So
Yeah,
you actually put yourself in a scenario that forces the emotion and the tears out of yourself.
absolutely. Absolutely. And if more men did that, I think we'd be in a lot better shape as a society, for sure.
This is one thing I have not talked about on the podcast with anyone so far. Sorry, it's just kind of hitting me because I do the same thing in my own way. I find satisfaction sometimes out of listening to songs that I know are going to trigger me to
Yeah.
tears.
Yeah. Spotify has a playlist that says crying songs, you know. So,
Oh, I
yeah, so
wasn't
there you
okay.
go.
Okay, listeners, I was not
There you
even aware of
go.
this. Go get yourself some Spotify crying songs
Yeah.
if you want to get the flow of emotions going.
But I learned this from one of my mentors, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who's a developmental psychologist who runs the Neufeld Institute there in Vancouver. And he does the same thing. He's got some VHS movies like Old Yeller and that kind of stuff. And his family will say, hey, I think it's time for you. Because, it heals the brain. Like, it's when you come up against a futility that you can't control, it actually creates healing in the brain.
Mm,
And the chemical composition of tears, of joy, are completely different than the chemical composition of tears of sadness. And
totally.
if you look at that show Inside Out, right? There's a scene in that show the movie Inside Out, which is a brilliant movie, by the way, where Bing Bong loses his toy rocket that he had as a child, and it gets shoveled over the cliff, like back into the subconscious. And Joy comes along and says, "Hey, let's who's ticklish?" She tries to distract him out of it, and then Sadness comes along and says, you lost somebody you loved, and or you lost something you loved, and there's a lot of sadness that goes with that. And then he cries, but he cries candies, like he cries Halloween candies. And after he cries,
Mm,
he says, it's okay, I can go on now. But I think a lot of male mental health would be so much more improved if we could just, you don't have to do it in the supermarket in front of everybody, but if you can realize that it's, along with sleep, it's the way that the brain heals itself, and
that's
it's
so
completely
beautiful.
natural, and it's completely natural.
I'm a soul sister over here saying the same thing. So I think all
Nice.
men and women, I understand why you're saying the male in particular, because I think it's a lot more acceptable and still open for females to express emotions
Oh yeah.
freely more so than men. So I understand where that's coming from your end. I just think in general, I have a saying that even rocks cry. And I
Yeah.
find, especially because I feel like a lot of the people who are listening to my podcast are, if you're listening out there, more than likely, I know that you are someone that wears the weight of the world on your shoulder. You're a really strong soul and a strong individual. And a lot of times you are that go to for everyone else in your
Yeah.
life. But you need to be able to be human and you need to be able to release your emotions too. And that's why, hence that saying, I came up with it when I was going through a period in my life where I honestly just was not allowing myself to feel and not release. And I finally got to a point where I had a breakdown and I finally just bawled my eyes out. And I came out. It was almost like source was flowing through me, as woo woo as that sounds. And
Mm-hmm.
that came out of my mouth. I was like, even rocks cry. So this daily habit, you said every 2 weeks you do this.
Love
That's
that.
brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's so smart. And then what does your morning routine look like?
Yeah.
I'm a morning routine fanatic. I love
Right.
studying them. I love creating them. I have my own master morning routine that I continually refine. And I really am curious what your morning routine looks like every day.
Usually what I'll do is I'll get up, I'll put my hand on my chest for about 5 minutes just to connect with myself. I'll go pee, like I said. I'll give Buddha some kisses on his snout for about 2 minutes. He hates it, but I love it. And then I throw my yoga mat down if it's not already out, and I bend my spine 6 ways. So I'll stand, I'll go lateral right, lateral left, forward fold, back bend, and then twist. And then I'll do a little bit of yoga, warrior two, warrior one, that kind of stuff, just to stretch out my legs. And then I go and do some mirror work where I go and address some of the issues from my childhood, where I look right into the mirror and talk to my younger self, and just explain to him that what happened was not your fault, and that you're making the best of it and you're changing the world by helping other people. And that's usually, that's usually the start of it too. Like the yoga can last anywhere between like 15 and sometimes I'll go an hour if I'm really feeling it, and it really just gets my mind
Mm-hmm.
and body back connected. But, I really do have this feeling that I was given a ton of pain in my life. And I think we talked about this before, you and I, the people that are
Mm-hmm.
given a ton of pain in their life have been giving it for a reason. They know, whatever the consciousness knows we can handle it. And it also knows that eventually we're going to help people with it. And I think that's really what it comes down to for me. And that's what keeps me going. It's just helping other people with it. Because like I said, my little catchphrase is that I don't want people to have to suffer like I did, because I know the therapies that I went through that didn't work. And I don't want to have people to have to repeat those. I want to give them a completely new perspective that I got from psychedelics mostly, but also there's some academic stuff in there too. But it's just like looking at mental health in a very different way from a doctor who suffered from mental health issues most of his life. And I still have my struggles, but I'm infinitely better than I was. Infinitely better.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my heart is just smiling right now. It's touched because I totally feel you. And I know so many people listening out there feel you as well. Oh, I just, such a sense of relief, even just us chatting about it, because, and I know from someone who has suffered from anxiety for many years and also things like ADHD and really extreme highs and lows, the more we talk about it and communicate and speak up and share, that's a therapy in itself. So
Oh
the
yeah.
fact that you and I are even having this conversation about mental health and not being afraid to open up, this is therapy right now. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I'm just so you guys know, listening, this is
Yeah.
just my therapy session.
We're
This
not
is
going to
just
charge.
Dr.
Yeah.
Russ's therapy
Yes, I'm going to
session.
send her an invoice. I'm going to send
uh,
Mandy an invoice after this.
ditto,
Yeah.
ditto.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness,
My
Russ.
my OCD and my ADD kind of cancel each other out, so it works out okay.
You and I
So it
both,
works
my
well.
dear. You and
Now,
I
earlier
both.
on in the thing, you said you wanted to talk about the hypnagogic state. It's such a fertile time. Like when you first get up, it's your subconscious is really open at that particular point. So I'm not a huge affirmation guy, but I'm a big feeling guy. So if you can really sort of dredge up some feeling when you first wake up about how much you care for yourself and how much what can I do for myself today? Because so much of it, and I was in this for a long time. That's why I was a doctor. Was so much of it was how can I give to other people? How can I give to other people? Because typically when I was younger, how I got my own needs met was fulfilling the needs of my parents. So it's like cutting out the middleman, giving it to myself directly was hugely, hugely powerful. So that hypnagogic state when you first start to wake up is really such a fertile ground for sort of getting into that feeling. Affirmations are just words. Unless they have feeling behind them, they don't do much. Now, the other part is when you're going to sleep that night, that's a great time to start, really having the feeling like what I do sometimes when I'm in a phase where I don't want to go to the gym very much is I really feel like I'm at the gym. I'm loving it there. I'm saying hi to my friends, and it's amazing how often no matter how tired I am, I just find myself in the car driving to the gym. So those two periods of when you're first waking up and when you're first going to sleep, the hypnagogic states are so suggestible, and so that's where you can change your life every day.
That is such a beautiful practice to develop. What self-care and spiritual rituals do you love to practice?
I think that the whole thing when I connect with myself every day is kind of a spiritual thing. I have a little like mini statue of Jizo, who is kind of like the patron saint of lost children. And whenever I travel, whenever I go, whenever I do talks, I always carry Jizo with me. But I don't have, I would say, like a real spiritual practice where I sort of, you know, put myself, prostrate to a deity of some kind. Although I have Ganesh beside me, I have Lakshmi, I have Shiva, that kind of stuff. I have the little things that I got in India, and I look at them every day, and I touch them every day, kind of like an OCD kind of thing. Like, okay, what have you got for me today, Shiva? And I do that every day. But as far as really, other than like my meditations, which I've fallen off of lately. Thanks for bringing that up. And it's you know. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of spiritual stuff. I think what I would say is my tears are spiritual. I would say that, and it's hard for an alpha male like me to kind of admit that, but it's true, and it's really I'm putting my own ego aside here to try and help other men, see that this is something that we can do that will help us. And I know there'll be guys like, ah, you're crying, you're a sissy, you're a sissy boy. We don't want no sissy boys. So it's one of these things where if I can get that out there and allow men to kind of, in private or whatever, get it. It's such a huge healing resource for women and men, but especially for men. Like, men really, really, really need it.
What are you curious about right now?
How my book's gonna do. That's a big one. That's a big one. I'm really curious about how to keep separating the alarm in my body from the thoughts of my mind, like novel ways of doing it. Creating a practice where I just completely accept, because I do feel the alarm that we hold in our body is our younger selves. And I have this little saying too, that any overreaction that we have, like if we freak out about something, any overreaction is an age regression. So if your partner pisses you off and you just freak out and you know that you've lost it, it's like, ask yourself, what age am I right now and what is going on
Yeah.
in my life?
It's
So
that 3-year-old that blank happened to.
and that's a whole other podcast too. But what happens if your trauma is pre-verbal, like before like 5 or 7 years old? Because we don't have the language before that. See, I'm lucky in a way that most of my trauma occurred when I was like 10, 11, 12, 13. And I had language, so I can talk to that part with language. But if your trauma is pre-verbal, you really have, your best way of going at that is through the body and feeling, and then creating a feeling state. Because my wife's a somatic experiencing practitioner. So, she goes in through the body, and I've learned so much from her. So again, I got this huge wall of science on one side, and then this huge wall of kind of like, okay, this is more ethereal kind of stuff. And I try and blend them together. And it's amazing how well they actually do blend together, the scientific and the more ethereal, when you really look at the truth of what everything is.
It is a lovely marriage, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Russ, what's something you failed at?
Oh, what did I fail at? I want to give you a real one here, because rather than just, I've been married twice. I've been married twice. This is my third marriage. My early marriages, I just wasn't emotionally available. Well, I certainly wasn't abusive, but I wasn't like, like neglectful, or there wasn't anything you could point to. Like, people outside of us, as who watched both of my marriages as couples, would never say, oh, he didn't seem like he was ignoring her or anything like that. But just emotionally, I was in something called defensive detachment, which is, if you put your hand on a stove when you're younger, your brain says never put your hand on a stove again, and that's good. But if you get burned by love, which is a story that I'm revamping, but with my dad, I loved him so much, and then it was so much pain that came in. What my brain learned was love is not safe. For a long time, I would get so far in a relationship and think, oh no, this isn't safe, and then I would have to pull out.
And that's something I really want people out there also to hear straight from you, because, I think from an outside perspective, you've had a successful looking life.
Yeah,
And looking, yes. I know there's always way more than meets the eye. Not that you haven't been successful, you have,
no,
but
I'm joking.
And that's the thing. I think for so many people, it's so easy. And this goes for pretty much anyone. It's just so easy to be an outsider looking in and thinking like the grass is greener, or, they have it all made, or there's fame or fortune or whatever's attached, or title, or whatever the case may be. Here's the thing. A lot of times it's those kind of scenarios where I think there's such a golden nugget of wisdom in what you just said, in that it's not, you actually pulled away when you loved someone too much, in a sense, psychologically. I think a lot of times in relationships, especially intimate or romantic relationships, people look at someone pulling away as though it's something they're responsible for, they're doing, or they need to change. Whereas a lot of times it, like you said in the beginning of our interview, it's a lot of times, or more than likely, that person themselves has some sort of attachment issue. So they're pulling away because they're afraid of how much they're starting to actually be attached to you.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point, Manny. It's a brilliant point. Yeah, because it's, so much of it, we assume that we are having this influence on this other person, and that's influencing their behavior. It may not be us that's having the influence. It may be their mother or their father that they are perceiving through us, so we don't really know another person. We just know our perception of them. That's all we know. So when we get, withdrawn or angry or whatever, often it isn't at the other person personally. They're doing something that in our childhoods really triggered us. And
Oh,
that's what's coming up.
yes.
And then we make the mistake that it's them, but it's not them. For one, it's us, and it's our old wounds that are coming out through them. And in a way, they're giving us an opportunity to heal them. Like when they bring up, when you're a couple and you fight about the exact same thing, it's like, well, where did I have this exact same thing in my childhood, and where can I look at sort of, healing that, and then putting my hand on my chest and talking to that part at 12 or whatever that was hurt by someone or something. That's where you
Hmm.
need to go. It's not the other person. The other person actually, when you look at it, I'm in this group that says the other person actually really doesn't exist. It's your own perception of them. It's your own perception of what they are doing. But if you look back, we have a little saying called just like when. So if someone says, oh God, I hate it when my wife organizes everything. It's like, well, just like when? Well, my mother used to organize the play, like plan the fun out of everything. So it always goes back if you look for it, and that's where you could heal
That's
it.
brilliant.
That's
And
where
I
you
know
could
you and
heal
I
it.
keep throwing around the B word because I know we just appreciate what we both are putting out there. But communication, obviously, in general, could alleviate so much heartache and headache. That's something that I always say. But that question alone could, I feel like, resolve so much misunderstanding in intimate relationships
Yeah.
alone by just saying, hey, obviously, I've triggered you in some way. I know my action right now has probably in some form occurred in your past. Can you remember a time when that actually happened?
Yeah, and this is the classic case of sort of coming back, because when you're in it, what happens when you're in it is you go into survival brain. When you go into survival brain, all you see is threat. So you lose
Mm,
your prefrontal cortex, you lose your rational ability. So it's a matter of, when you're calm later on going, that really, it's not personal to you, but I remember when I
mm.
was younger, my mother would withhold food from me. So when you gave the last pork chop to your son as opposed to giving it to me, I had this age regression freak out, and then you can kind of, if you track it back to where it comes from, you can actually do something about healing it. Otherwise, couples just recapitulate the same argument over and over and over again.
So much wisdom and so much truth in that. So we could do a whole pod. We might have to do a whole podcast on
Another one.
relationships.
Do another
Here's
one.
one thing that I'm very curious. Do you, because we're talking about perspective, do you
Yeah.
perceive those two marriages as failures today? Do you actually look
No.
at them as failures, or are they something else to you now?
No, I'm completely fine with I'm good actually. My first wife is the mother of my daughter, who's now pregnant with her second baby, who's going to be my second grandchild. I can't believe my grandfather, but hey, whatever. Um, the second one was a lot more tumultuous, but I certainly learned a lot more from, well, in different ways. I learned a lot from both of them, but I don't consider them failures. I still love both of the women. I still think they're both awesome women. But I can see now where, the first one was basically someone who I saw as taking care of me because I didn't feel like I got taken care of as a child. And the second one was I felt like I was taking care of her because she didn't get taken care of as a child. And my current relationship with Cynthia, like we have this ability, no relationship is perfect, but we have this ability to sort of switch the alpha role. So
Mm.
I may need some help and she's alpha, and then she may need some help and I'm alpha. So we kind of flip back and
It
forth. And I
sounds like
think
much more of a partnership.
it is, yeah. Whereas my first two marriages, my first wife was definitely the alpha 90% of the time. And then the second one, I was the alpha 90% of the time. So there wasn't this sort of reciprocal back and forth kind of thing where you can develop some comfort and some safety, because you're playing a role. When you're alpha all the time, it's a role, and it's a protective role, and it's a coping mechanism, and it's a neurosis.
That's a really beautiful way to sum up what a successful relationship looks like to you.
Yeah, it's just trading off alpha.
Oh, I love that. That's a
Well,
beautiful
that's a
nutshell.
Neufeld. That's not mine. That's Gordon Neufeld. So,
Yes.
but I definitely
That's
learned a
that's a
lot
really
from
good
him.
way to put it though, for
Yeah,
sure. It's just that trade-off and that reciprocation of the give and the take, and that's just a myriad of different hats that you
yeah.
can pass off. I'm also curious when it comes to anxiety. It sounds like obviously you've gone through and grown through so many personal experiences over your life to get to the solution. So it's not something that you feel that was obvious to you.
No, unless I did LSD, I probably would still be anxious. In fact, I probably would have committed suicide by now. because I just didn't see a way out. You know, I'd retired as a physician, and being a physician was a huge part of my identity. You know, so I'd retired as that, so I lost all that, you know, sort of positivity that I would get. And I was just locked in this sort of alarm anxiety cycle where, you know, I get this alarm in my body, which I would get these horrible thoughts, and then the horrible thoughts would make the alarm worse, and that would make the thoughts even more alarming. And then I was just caught trapped in this cycle. And it wasn't until I did LSD and to some extent ayahuasca that I saw that I could separate the two. And when I could separate the thoughts in my mind from the alarm in my body, then there was actually a way out. Now, it took a while for my body to kind of calm down because it was in this hypervigilant state. But I realized under LSD that it was like, hey, you know, I have control over this. I don't have to think. I don't have to believe everything I think. How's that?
That is pure soul nourishment right there. Russ, what support or other resources, aside from some of the ones you've mentioned, would you personally recommend for people who are dealing or struggling with anxiety?
I would probably say, you know, learn how to breathe. Learn how to breathe properly, for one, because when you're in anxiety, the anxiety will breathe you. It'll breathe for you, and it'll make itself worse as opposed to making you better. So learn how to breathe properly and practice that. Don't just use it when you're anxious. You know, learn how to breathe when you're, you know, relaxing, when you're just, you know, on the internet or whatever. Take 5 minutes out and breathe. Put your hand on your chest, feel your breath, and really savor your breath. Really get into the feeling, really get into the sensation of your life, because sensation is the moment, and anxiety is all about the future. Anxiety is all, I hope this doesn't happen. I hope, warnings, what ifs, worst case scenarios. So it's as many things as you can do to keep yourself in the present as possible. If you're looking at therapists, I would definitely look at a therapist who practice some sort of somatic experiencing or Hakomi, Hakomi, or somatic experiencing. If you look up Dr. Peter Levine, he's got somatic experiencing, because I do feel, especially with anxiety, maybe not so much with depression and some of the other, you know, mental disorders, but definitely with anxiety, it's just being able to connect with that part of you that was wounded as a child. And the anxiety gets worse because it's yelling at you for attention. You know, if you had a child in front of you who is 3 years old holding his arms up, you know, crying, would you just say, no, I got to go on the internet right now, or I got to go have a drink right now? No, you'd pick him up and you'd hold him and you tell him he was okay. And that's what I mean when you find that alarm in your body. And this is one of the things that I kind of teach people is, where is this alarm in your body? Find it, and then really pay attention to it, because chances are that's the part of you that needs the healing. And you don't get that healing by thinking about it. You get that healing by feeling it. You got to feel it to heal it, basically.
Oh, love that. Feel it to heal it. I am going to do quote unquote quickie time with you now. This
Okay.
part of, I don't know what
No, I won't
connotation
tell
you
my
have,
wife.
but
We'll be
quickie
okay.
time. Oh, goodness gracious, Russ. Not that kind of quickie time. This kind of quickie time is I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I
Okay.
just want you to say whatever comes to your mind, short and sweet. If you had to recommend one book that could positively change someone's life, of course, aside from the one that you're currently working on, what book would it be and why?
A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle, because it gives you a perspective of where your pain comes from.
What quote do you live by and why that one?
You can't think your way out of a feeling problem, because for many, many years, I tried to think my way out of anxiety, and I just made the anxiety worse.
And is that your quote or is that somebody else's?
Oh, it's not. No. I think it is mine. I haven't seen it written anywhere else.
So
Yeah.
that's one that you say to yourself constantly.
Yeah.
Awesome. On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you?
Hi. You know, I'm probably an 8. You know, I know how to play. I know, you know, I did the doctor thing for a long time. I was a corporate speaker with National Speakers Bureau. I know how to do the suit corporate thing, you know, but in my own mind, I'm different. There's no two ways about that. I definitely look at the world differently, but I can play the game and I'm good at it. But I am different.
I love it.
I am different.
You wear your weirdo hat proudly.
Yep. Well, I admit on a popular podcast that I cry every 2 weeks. How's that? What else do
This
you
is
need?
true. This is true. All right, Russ, what are you not very good at?
What am I not very good at? I am not very good at seeing things on the floor, according to my wife. I'm not very good
Oh,
at cleaning. I'm not very good at cleaning stuff. I'm a bit messy. you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
I can appreciate that. What is your favorite season and why?
definitely summer for sure, just because it's warm and there's lots of things to do. And I feel this sort of heat that I can kind of, just radiate throughout my whole body.
Do you have any guilty pleasures?
What's a guilty pleasure? I mean, chocolate. I'd like to come up with something like I just said. I was 8 out of 10 weird, and like my guilty pleasure is chocolate. Yeah, right, buddy. Car screaming, probably when I get
Car
really frustrated.
screaming.
Car screaming when I get really frustrated with something and I can't get to my tears. I will go out in the car and just start screaming at the top of my lungs. And that works
Okay.
usually. That works. And I recommend it to everybody. I mean, not in a high density, place like Vancouver, but if you're in a kind of a farmer area or whatever, just go and just have at it.
I can attest this is a very beautiful and feel good release.
Yeah.
100%. I love it, car screaming. If you could eat only one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh man. I was gonna say chocolate, but that doesn't have
You
all
can
the
say
eight
chocolate.
the eight
Yes,
amino acids. I can't have it in the house though. Like, yeah, I can't go when we go grocery shopping. We go to Whole Foods to eat our dinner, so we get like a $32 salad, and then we go over to Walmart for thing, and I can't. And Sin says, should we get some chocolate? And I'm like, no, we cannot have chocolate in the house because I will freaking eat it. I can't.
I hear you.
I have
I so
no.
feel you on
I can
that.
get crap chocolate. I can get crap chocolate like with nuts and it's like milk chocolate with nuts and that kind of stuff. And I can nibble at that. But if you get me like salted caramel chocolate, I will eat 2 bars of that thing in one sitting.
Okay, good to know. If anyone is going to be crossing paths with Russ,
Yeah,
you now know
that's
the way
that's the
to
way to
his
bribe
heart.
me. The way to bribe me. Salted caramel
Oh,
chocolate.
I love it. What are
Okay.
you most excited about that's coming up?
Probably the book, I think. I'm also writing some pieces for Men's Health, Canadian Men's Health Foundation, helping men kind of understand what's going on in their mind. It's the Don't Change Much program. And so I'm writing stuff for them. And you've got a business coach out of the States now, and just sort of getting a business going about coaching, kind of using my sort of, I hate to use the word psychic, like clairvoyant, clairsentient
Intuitive.
ability,
Intuitive.
intuitive. Yeah, there it is. There it is. Abilities, because I can pretty much tell where your childhood trauma is in about 4 to 5 minutes, and tell you what to do about it. So that's my
Mm.
superpower. So I want to turn that into a business and help people. And I'd like to focus on doctors actually, because I think doctors need it more than almost anybody else at this point. And then once I get good at it, then I can send it out to the rest of the world. I'd love to help doctors who are burning out, because I know why they burn out, and it's not about the patients. And I'd like to help them to be able to practice medicine in a way that fulfills them at the same time. But I also have this huge desire to help people, just anyone who's suffering with anxiety. My heart goes out to you. I know how painful it is. I've been to the wall with anxiety where I thought I can't keep living like this. So I've got a real soft spot for anyone with anxiety. So I have to try and figure out how I can serve everybody, and then serve people at a different level as well. So I'll try to figure that out, but I'm excited about the opportunity.
Amazing. So, you know that this is Pave Your Paradise podcast, and I would love to know what paradise means to you. How would you personally define it?
I think it's just being good with whatever sensation you're in at the moment. I think that would be paradise for me. So often I think we look at, oh, I'll be on this trip, or I'll be with this person, or whatever. It's just trying to just be in that place of acceptance and love for yourself, because I didn't have it for so long. And just being, just there, and whatever you're experiencing in the moment is good, and being able to just feel it rather than just sort of deflect in or detour into thinking and having to kind of explain it or whatever. It's just being okay with whatever feeling that I have. To me, that would be paradise.
Is there anything you wish we'd had talked about today?
No, I think you covered everything, Mandy. I don't know if anybody's been more thorough than you, as far as you've got more stuff out of me than I think anybody. The
And
tears, the chocolate, the whole bit.
oh man, I know you in and out, Dr. Russ.
Yeah.
Now, how can I and the audience of listeners serve you? How can we help you in the highest way?
Go on my website, theanxietymd.com. Just look up, Google The Anxiety MD. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram. the more stuff that I get back from people, the more stuff that I like to produce. And I get little sort of PMs from people all the time saying, I know it doesn't seem like you're doing something, but I came back the other night and I was really depressed, and I was really considering it wasn't, life wasn't worth living. I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but read your Facebook message on antidepressants, and it really, I was on the fence, and it really helped me clear up what I was thinking and the resistance that I was having. So just, the more stuff I kind of get back, the more it feeds me to keep doing this work, because it is kind of lonely when you work really hard and you know so much. It sounds very egotistical, but I mean, I don't think that there's anyone in the world who knows as much about understanding the treatment of anxiety from as many perspectives as I do. I really want to be able to help people, like I said, I keep saying it, not have to suffer like I did.
All right, listeners, you've heard it straight from Dr. Anxiety MD himself. Whatever you're dealing with, he wants to hear about it. Do not hesitate. Do not be shy. Send Dr. Russell Kennedy, Mr. Anxiety MD, your biggest pain points, because that way he can make and create things that can help you, solutions that can help to heal you in the highest way. And Russ, where is the best place to find you, to learn more about you and what you do? Would that be your website?
Probably the website, but if you just Google the Anxiety MD, there's a whole bunch of stuff that'll pop up there, and you can just take your pick. The YouTube channel has a lot of information on it that's free. Instagram has a lot of more fun stuff. Whatever you resonate with, just go with that.
I can attest to, I've looked at your stuff on a myriad of platforms, and it's all very helpful. You really break down some complex topics and some very complicated things, and you really have a beautiful way of communicating it in a way that's very easily digestible. So I will say that's definitely worth checking out. Russ, I am so grateful for you sharing your space and time with my audience of Pave Your Paradise listeners today. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Annie. You're definitely one of my peeps. Like, I knew as soon as we had our first little conversation, it's like, this is somebody that I could really sort of open up and chat with. So you're brilliant at what you do. I follow you on Instagram. I follow you all over. I think you're a real shining beacon of just sunshine and light. But also, there's a realness about you that I really, really love. So just keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and feeling at peace right now too. I have to say, the exchange of energy here is just so peaceful and positive. Definitely no anxiousness within me right now. So thank you for your beautiful energy today.
You're welcome.
As well. Thanks so much for joining me. If there's anyone you know who you think could benefit from hearing today's episode, it would mean the world if you'd share it with them. Love what you heard? Then please subscribe. If you really love what you heard, then please leave a review with your honest and loving thoughts. This podcast wouldn't be possible without your support. If you feel called to, please make contributions to my podcast fund that helps me to keep it going strong, bringing on amazing guests for you, and to continue the ripple effect of spreading goodness in the world. I appreciate you, your time, and your energy, and I love hearing from you, so drop me a line on social media. As always, I'm wishing you a positive day and your own piece of paradise. Until next time, sending you love and light, and keep shining.